I'm Pat Welle. Professionally, I'm an economist, and I did a lot of work over the years on environmental and energy economics, so share that as background on how I've thought through doing a building project. And from my background, often it was more electricity is bad. In a vacuum, putting more demand on burning fossil fuels, etc., was not a good idea. But now, what we've learned in the advancements in technology, electrification can be very good if it means we're not using fossil fuels as much. But in order to accomplish that, the companion goal of building efficiency is critical. And I think of it as there's a third leg to the stool, which is having renewables as the source of the electricity in the first place. So that's kind of the way I've thought about this building project. The two sealed tubes go down, each have a loop in them of flexible pipe, and they come up through a sleeve that's also 8 feet down. So you have two sets of two tubes. This is called a 2-ton system. And so there's input and an output in those tubes, and this is what the tubes look like over here when they are placed in order to provide slab heat. So there'll be fluid running through. Again, this is a work in progress. Fluid running through the floor, and it's basically going to be a very efficient heat exchange for heating the space, because the fluid will be taking advantage of the 50-degree ground temps that the fluid will be circulating through as it goes through the 200 feet vertical tubes. It'll come in here, it'll be easy. There will be a big heat exchanger right here that will transfer heat from the 50-degree fluid to get it to, I'm not sure how high it will go, but it will be to easily get the temperature through the radiation from the floor of 72, comfortable room temperature. But in doing that heat transfer, it'll be exporting the cold water after it's taken the heat off of it, and the cold water will go back through. The cold water goes back through the output part of the tubes, the loop, goes back into the 200-foot deep pipes, and over it's traveling that distance down and back up, it'll take on the temperature of the 50-degree ground. So that's an incredible way of getting heat and doing heat transfer. It can't be used for cooling, because if you try to cool down your floor in warm temperatures, it's going to cause horrible condensation. So it doesn't work that way. But the other equipment that's going to be installed here is a heat pump that will blow out air rather than circulating warm water through the pipes in the floor.
Because the floor stuff is geothermal, right?
Well, right, and this will actually be geothermal as well, but instead of an air source mini split, which has become very popular and I hope to install in the future, this isn't using the temperature of the air, but it's going to be using the temperature of the water, but blowing it out as either hot or cold air, rather than just circulating it into the tubes that are in the floor. So it's geothermal, but it's really a different kind of equipment, and the heat is being transferred in a different way. So that'll be the air conditioning, because when you got 50-degree groundwater to use for trying to blow out cool air, it's going to have, a really good source of original temperature rather than air source on a 90-degree day. So it'll blow out air conditioning in the summer, and it has the advantage of what otherwise would be a void in this whole design, is that it can also blow out heat so that we can get a quick warm-up. Whereas the slab heat, it's a heat sink. It's got 6 inches of sand as part of the mass of the whole system, and that's going to be slow to warm up. So I can set it, for times being gone, much lower than comfortable room temperature, and then be able to do the blowers off the 50-degree groundwater to heat up even faster.
What are all the things you're doing for energy efficiency efficiency, renewable energy in this?
Okay, well, renewable energy, we've got 6 kilowatt solar system, solar panels. Okay, so we're starting with that, starting with renewable. I'm hoping with the energy efficiency in the building, most months we will be producing way more in kilowatt hours than we're actually consuming. Excuse me, to keep the kilowatt hour consumption down, we've got super insulated walls. It's not the SIP structure, but it's similar in terms of its dimensional lumber, but it's got the foam panels on the outside, vapor barrier, super insulated doors, windows, garage doors. Windows are triple panel, or triple pane, I should say. And so that's the efficiency part of it. And then the electrification, to be able to do all of this, you know, we're not going to have any kind of burner of fossil fuels, propane, any of that. We've got, and thinking ahead as well, this electrical service is actually 400 amps, which is quite large based on what people have been doing. But I'm doing this in preparation for the future as well. Don't have it now, but I'm going to install, hopefully in the coming years, an EV charger. We've got the capacity to expand to that. As I mentioned, we want to do an air source mini split to do the heat pump. You know, it can be air conditioner and heat based on outside air. But for Minnesota, when you get below zero, that heat transfer from below zero air gets to be pretty difficult. But I do want to add that in the future.
Why is all this important to you?
Well, again, professionally and my own, I guess, environmental ethic is very concerned. I did projects, my PhD dissertation was actually on the economics of acid deposition back in the 80s, when Minnesota was a leader on trying to protect our lakes from acid deposition. So a lot of my research in environmental and energy economics has been to understand what's unsustainable about conventional energy. Burning coal, putting out sulfur dioxide, I mean, that was the science of acid deposition, or acid rain, as people are. Done a variety of projects just trying to understand the economics. And so when you look at the trade-offs, and for the future with the science of climate change, we really need to, you know, behave more sustainably. We need more sustainable systems. So my believing in that and learning about it, I wanted to implement as much of what I think is sustainable options into this building project. My big picture is, again, being an environmental and natural resource economist. I've published economic research on the threat of climate change and what's occurring, and the overall economic literature is overwhelmingly showing that together we're going to pay a lot more in damages during our lifetimes, and especially for the future generations if we don't address climate change. So it pays off even today to make the change, but it's an investment in a future where we have a more livable planet.
How do people find out rebates and what's available?
There's a great opportunity to learn by going to the website called Rewiring America, and it covers the federal policies on tax credits. For states that have decided, it has links to that. It has links to your own electric utility, where many electric utilities are giving rebates on purchasing energy efficient equipment. So I highly recommend Rewiring America. It also gets into the details about, you know, like with air source mini splits, what does or doesn't qualify in terms of new or retrofitted equipment. So all of those things are there. They have a question and answer part to it, and they actually have a tool where you can plug in your location and general categories of income as to what you qualify for. Many of the state programs connected to the Inflation Reduction Act that have already been decided are giving much bigger incentives to low and middle income people than they are people who, you know, maybe don't need it for the extra incentive. But that's an important part because some of this stuff is quite expensive. If you want to do it, it's good to make it accessible to people who, you know, are of lower or middle income categories. Minnesota hasn't, they didn't pass it in last year's session, but they will hopefully soon. So by 25, the Minnesota policy should be in place, and that's anticipated to give big financial help to people in low and middle income categories to you know, maybe get all the money back in terms of what they had to pay to do a more energy efficient technology.